Let's get into it. Super excited that Frankie, you were able to jump on and join me in this conversation. I am a firm believer that being trans is not something we experience as a monolith. All of our experiences are totally different. And so I love having somebody else on to also speak to their experiences as well. And one thing that I know we're new to each other, but one thing that I know we share in common is that we both ran for office. So I would love to give you some space to talk about your experience. I can also share some of mine, and let's see where the conversation goes from there.
Great. So yeah, I ran for office in 2019. Well, first, let me just say I'm not new to politics, right? So the very first campaign that I worked on was back in 1996 when it was a presidential campaign when I was working for the Clinton Gore campaign. Since then, I have been on campaigns ever since then. It's just part of my life. It's just what I know. Um, have to say that I became very politically involved in order to make a difference. Then in 2016, while I was working for the next Clinton, Hillary Clinton, during her campaign, I have to say that I met a young man who happened to be a documentarian who came in and he was happy to do a documentary about uh, volunteers, what it is to, for everybody that works in the background on campaigns. We grew a very great relationship with one another. And, we kept in touch. He started filming me, filming some other people that were working for the campaign. And then in 2018, I believe it was, is I picked up the phone. I called him and I said, "Hey, Ray, I'm going to be running for office." And, he was like, "Oh, what are you running for?" And I said, "City Council, District 8. Happened to live in a somewhat conservative part of the city of San Antonio. I knew it was going to be, pushing a boulder up the hill, but I knew visibility is important. So I decided that I was going to go ahead and give this a go. Ray came down, he started filming me, filming the campaign. Never knew, and I never would imagine that the all that filming was going to turn into this great documentary, which now I'm touring the country on with. It's called A Run for More. It's a great documentary. If for those who haven't seen it, I say go out and watch that film. Or it might be showing it at, in a city near you. But yeah, I just felt the time was now, and a little bit about why I got involved in running for office really stemmed from the amount of work that I have personally put in and getting people elected. So, as either a volunteer, a campaign strategist, a consultant, data, ethics, you name it. I've been in some facet in that world. But I also noticed that every time I've worked for a specific candidate, or we see on TV all the time from different candidates, it's always the use of the word LGBT. And I'm pro this, and we're trying to help the LGBT community accomplish this, and I'm for the LGBT community. They stand on these pedestals and they say these things all the time. But what I started to recognize was that these same politicians that were saying these things, they were saying a lot of these things weren't practicing what they were preaching. So when I started looking at their internal administrations, I didn't see anybody that looked like us. And so it started to weigh heavy on me, where I was like, well, I was a good ploy for you to be, or a tool for you to use while you were trying to get elected, but I wasn't good enough to be hired. So I started to say, why was that? So yeah, I decided to jump into this race and say it's time for us to start making a difference. It's time for us to start taking up oxygen in the room. It's time for visibility. It's time to be comfortable in our skin. It's time, for people, whether they felt uncomfortable or not. It wasn't my sport. I wasn't trying to make people uncomfortable. That was something that they have to own for themselves. But I wanted to let people know that we exist and we are more than the stigma that society wanted to place upon us. That we can accomplish a lot more. And so, yeah, that's the reason why I decided to run and try to make a difference in this community. Mind you, not all campaigns are successful, but I still say at the very end of the day, I ended up managing another campaign, and now I happen to be the first chief of staff in a southern state of Texas, and yeah, doing still in a different capacity, but still serving the community, which is what I love doing.
So awesome. I am so glad to hear your story, especially directly from you. So thank you for sharing that with me and the rest of us. Like I said at the start of this call, like we obviously are coming from different experiences and all that, but as I'm listening to your story, I'm like, oh, so much of that resonates with me, especially in the sphere of like I did not come from a campaign background by any means, but it was the talking. I heard so many people talking about this progressive notion and being in support of LGBT everything, but not actually walking the walk. And so, from my own experience, what got me to run was I actually was. I mean, I'm a little older than most folks in this community who are out right now, but I grew up in the '90s. Didn't hear the word trans ever. I didn't even know what that was until I was like in my mid 20s, because we often get left out of conversations, media. We don't have visibility, so this visibility that we do have currently is very, very new. So for me, yes, I was watching a Netflix documentary and saw this. It was something, I think it was called Queer. Long time ago, and heard for the first time the perspective of trans people, and was like, mi gente, mi people. That's hey, this is what's been missing my whole life. So when I finally decided to take the steps necessary to pursue my transition, it was an entire journey for me, like physically and mentally. I literally left. I was living in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina at the time. Could not find any kind of support whatsoever for my transition. So I was working as a DJ and a club promoter. I threw all my stuff into my 1998 Ford Windstar minivan, and I hit the road for a few months. And I just, was going to see friends that I hadn't seen in a while, and giving myself the time and space I needed to like figure out my life. And ironically, somebody had suggested that I go to Tennessee, and I was like, in case you haven't realized, I'm a little brown, a little trans for that state. But I heard wonderful things, made the journey, ended up in a very purple area, found a lot of support, surprisingly, for my transition. And so I got very excited about the possibility of like being able to live as my authentic self. And so at one point, I landed a job that had actual health insurance. So then of course this dream suddenly became more of a reality. So as soon as I started my transition, I actually got fired from my job for transitioning. And so it blew my mind that I finally was, it was like this carrot that had been dangled in front of me for so long. And so as I navigated what it looked like to be losing my insurance and trying to get any semblance of trans care, my experience was so I would call all of these providers and say, hey, I would love to see if I could make an appointment to be seen. Most of these providers would tell me, oh, sure, what would you need to be seen for? I said, well, I'm a trans guy. Almost every single instance of that conversation ended as them saying, you know what, sweetheart, I'm so sorry, we're actually not taking new patients right now. And so it was obviously very frustrating, especially because at that point I was 35 years old, and to me, all of the chatter, all of the arguments of like, trans people don't know who they are. I'm like, I'm 35 years old. I have been around the block a couple of times. Like that argument doesn't hold water. Um, you know, and so yeah, just navigating all of the obstacles and the barriers to just be able to exist in a way that is peaceful, comfortable, any of that. It was so near impossible to find. I literally had to go to Asheville, North Carolina to be seen for the first time from Knoxville, Tennessee. In case y'all don't know, that's a 110-mile drive across a very large mountain range. And, having to pay out of pocket because now at that point I didn't have insurance. When they said, oh, it's going to be $165 out of pocket, they could have said it's going to be $10,000. It had the same weight to me of this is near impossible at this point. So I just kept feeling like the mile marker was getting moved further and further away from me being able to ever achieve my transition. So fast forward a little bit, and marriage equality passes. So one of the couples that sued for the right to marry was in Knoxville, and the city decides they're going to have this huge rally to celebrate this victory. And I had heard such wonderful things about the mayor because she turned our bridge rainbow every year during Pride, and she just seemed fairly progressive. Um, and so I was super excited because, again, I wasn't from the area, so it was really cool to be connecting with community and seeing such support. And so, yes, I go to this rally. There's like 4,000 people there. And the mayor gets up. She does this wonderful speech, really, really making the community feel so empowered and excited and stuff. So she gets off the stage and she's talking to a few people. I wait for the crowd to disperse a little bit, and I went up to her and I said, "Hey, I know you're really busy right now. I would love to talk to you about trans issues sometime." All I wanted from this lady was a business card, y'all. That's it. That's all I wanted. Instead, I got blown off. She pointed to a crowd of 4,000 predominantly white people and says, "Sure, you can talk to my assistant, Matt." I mean, I didn't feel like playing Where's Waldo that day. And so I just kind of laughed for a second. And I was like, sure, let me get right on top of that. I said, "Hey, you know what?" I said, "My name is Jack Knoxville. Have you ever heard of me?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, you will." And I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I was fuming. Um, and especially because here she had just given this wonderful speech to make it sound like she cared so much about this community and all this, and then to receive that reaction. So, yeah, a short time after that, I was doing all of the Uber, Grubhub, Lyft, whatever hustle kind of work I could get my hands on. Because, as you well know, Frankie, I'm sure, all of the issues with finding employment as you're transitioning were situations I was dealing with, and so I happened to be at home. I was working on a website for some people. I do graphic design and stuff like that as well. And I saw this story pop up saying that this mayor was running unopposed. It was 3:30 on a Friday, the last day for anybody to run against her or even register as a write-in candidate. And as soon as I saw that message, I mean, I don't know what it was. This light switch in my brain was like, nope. And I was like, the hell she is. And I shut my laptop and I got up, I grabbed my keys, I went down to the courthouse, I got a petition, and I ran around downtown Knoxville like a maniac, getting the 25 signatures I needed on my petition to become a write in candidate. I honestly I had no interest in being the mayor of Knoxville, but exactly like you said, Frankie, it was about the visibility for me. I refused at that moment. It was that was it. I was so tired of being ignored and being minimized and having all of these people tout themselves as being allies and people who care, and good people, but then doing everything they could to keep my voice silenced. So I really love that your story is also similarly rooted in that and creating that visibility, because for me that's exactly a huge part of the work that we have ahead of us is like creating the visibility that we've been denied for so long. And so let me ask you, from your perspective, like how have things changed since you ran, especially like in your own area? What kind of impacts and things are you seeing?
Sure. So first, I'll say, the beauty about running for office is the opportunity to be able to meet so many people, right? From different backgrounds, where they are, where they were, how they became in their current, area of what they're doing. So for me personally, my journey in running for office had a lot to do with growth. I I learned so much more about the trans community from what I thought I knew. Like you, I was able to. I didn't transition until I was in my late 30s. I am older. I grew up in the 80s. Okay, so being older, I thought I understood what it was, but it quite wasn't that. It wasn't until I started hearing the first time I went to lobby day in Austin, Texas, when I started meeting a lot of different trans people, and started hearing their stories, I recognized my privilege. I recognized that I came from a family that was extremely supportive of what I was doing. I realized that I had an amazing husband. I had a home. I drove a nice car. I had all these things that not many in the trans community had. They were homeless. The people were living in different kind of housing developments, and 12, 15 of them living in small 2 bedrooms, 3 bedroom places. And I started to break down a little bit, because I kept using the word a seat at the table. I wanted to have a seat at the table, and so that I can make a difference, a profound difference for the community, not realizing and understanding my privilege. So I think from the growth then and to now, and how I've been utilizing everything that I've been able to accomplish and understand about myself, my world has changed immensely. I now am a better listener to what people are trying to tell me, and their experiences, and not taking that for granted. It helps me understand how I can better assist the community holistically, and how I can be a better participant in democracy, and how we inspire others to just get out and vote. So I use the word accountability a lot, as somebody who was from a long time wanting that seat at the table and not realizing I already had it ish, right? Because I grew up in politics. I could easily walk into a congressman's office, or a state senator's office, or you name it. I mean, I've worked on so many campaigns that I grew up in this world that everybody just knew who I was, and so I was the exception to the rule for so many people. And now it's about accountability. For me, I think it's important when we talk about where I am today now, and how I push for um, voting rights, accessibility, getting people to the polls, working with organizations that inspire those, that we try to get a larger turnout. Now, mind you, whether you are voting Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green, Libertarian, whatever your part, whatever person is inspiring you to be able to get out and utilize your voice at the ballot, that for me was that's been so important as part of this message. For me now, I've learned, I work with a lot, being the chief of staff to the county commissioner. I work a lot with Republicans. A lot of them happen to be part of the community where they're construction company owners, engineer company owners, and it doesn't bother me that they, how can I put this? Like, I take up space is what I'm saying. I don't try to hide who I am or try to blend into the background. I take up space. I'm proud of, who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish. I have all these very open and honest conversations when people are asking me about my transition and what it was like, and the experience and everything that I've had, and everything that I've gone through, me personally, in my personal journey. I'm fortunate enough to be able to say, well, go look at my documentary, right? It's going to tell you my entire history. But I'm able to have this conversation differently now, with a different hat on, just because of my experience, and being able to really open my mind to the quality of lives that the trans community really goes through. And it's important for us to really pay attention to the people that we are electing to office, to ensure that they are truly representative of us, of who we are as a community. And mind you, just because you like them, and if they are not keeping up their end of the bargain, we vote them out. We take them out. Accountability is important. We have to hold them accountable to ensure that we make our country, our space safer for the next generation.
Absolutely. Similarly, when I ran for office, I also experienced a lot of like getting to know the community around me, not just, I mean, like again, I was new to the area, so hearing more about what other people's experiences were like and stuff like that was super empowering. But I think the key to what you were saying for me, and also something I apply to my work, is it's about building relationships and using your voice in a way that is powerful and impactful. And so one of the programs that I actually have through Trans Empowerment Project is called Take Back the Narrative. And the idea behind it is exactly that, is that the trans community, we are not the ones in control of our narratives. It's people who don't really know who we are. And so we need to be able to tell our stories. We need to be able to show up and make our voices heard. But this is also super important as well with showing up at the polls and voting, is being able to create that visibility by making sure you are casting your ballot. And for the trans community specifically, there are so many obstacles and barriers that we faced, from not being able to access get voter IDs. I mean, to get our legal IDs. I think it's like 46% of us do not have identification that matches with our gender presentation and our identity. So going to the polls to cast your ballot, you face the unfortunate experience too often of being turned away and things like that. But I love that sessions like this are happening, because we give people the chance to understand that, like, we can't just allow people to silence us and to turn us away at the polls. When that happens, we can get provisional ballots. We can make sure that we are still being counted. But it is important to show up. It is important to make sure you are telling your story. It's important, to really just create those relationships within your community, within the local community. Extending the time, like you were saying, reaching across the aisle, reaching across to your neighbors, getting to know each other on a personal level, so that it's no longer this, like, monster, this portrait of a fearful person. That's the narrative of transness. But you, as a human, the humanity that you bring into this world, and really, like, we all deserve to thrive. So to your point too, is like, we do have to hold our folks accountable. So being able to have conversations with each other about that accountability and educate one another about what is at stake. Like right now, we there is so much at stake, but number one, that's at stake on this year, is really on bodily autonomy. And it doesn't matter which way you vote. I don't care if you're voting Democrat, Republican, whatever. It's about doing the right things, and making sure that we are creating a world where we are focused on empathy and kindness and space and grace for one another. We should be making sure that especially disabled, queer, trans, and intersex people of color can thrive, because this is the most marginalized community in existence. So if our folks have the ability to thrive, then so does everybody else, because then this world is set up to support all of us. And so for me, that is a big part of why I firmly believe that we need to show up at the polls. This is not the time to shy away from making our voices heard. This is the time that we need to show up the most. And we need to make sure that we're voting together, encouraging our friends and family to also show up at the polls. Because really and truthfully, democracy doesn't work until we have all had the opportunity to be heard from.
I agree. I agree. Throughout this opportunity and being able to travel around the country with the documentary, I typically get asked, especially in rural parts of states that feel like it's extremely conservative, and for the LGBT community that lives in these states, they feel like there's no resources or nothing available to them. I always tell them it's the old philosophy, right? If you build it, it shall come. And I feel like if it doesn't exist in your community, then build it. That it's our responsibility at the very end of the day. It's my responsibility to ensure that I make, yes, it might take a little more work on my part, which I'm willing to do. But if it means that I have to do a little more work so that the next generation of trans kids do not have to work as hard, mind you, they're still going to have to work, but if they don't have to work as hard, then I've accomplished something at the end of the day. I feel like we live in a country now where there's just, we are riddled with so much anger and hate, and there has to be a balance somehow. I don't know what that looks like, but I do know a way that we can start shifting things around is when we start getting involved in the process. So I really encourage everyone, allies the same, that, because they're affected. They're affected as much as we are. When we transition into our truths, they transition along with us. They knew a version of us, and they have to transition to who we are today. And so it's a transition for everyone together. So we know that it's just as important to them as it is to us. And so, I just encourage for all of those that are watching and listening that you really, take 10, 15, 20, pick up a phone, call your list of all of your contacts, and make sure that they go out and they vote. It's extremely important. We should not let our voices be unheard. So the more that we can get people involved in democracy and in the process, the better that we're going to be. The better we'll be off. But I don't believe that these states are red or blue. I believe they're non-voting at the very end of the day. I think if our turnout was greater, then we can start actually saying we live in this type of state. When I start seeing 96% registered voters voting, I can say, hey, you know what, your state might be red, or hey, your state might be blue. But until that happens, you're just a non-voting state. So, I think that we need to encourage more of that and just get people more involved.
Absolutely. I know we have to give it back to Kate in just a second, but I just wanted to bring up one quick thing, which is I love what you were just talking about with call your list, because that is so important. Is that a lot of folks don't realize the impact and the power that you have with doing just that. That's relational organizing. It's reaching out to the people you already have a relationship with, because they trust you, they know you, they're going to listen to you, and they're going to listen to you before they're going to listen to me. Just because I'm a stranger, and whatever other identities or biases or whatever people have. But at the end of the day, your relationships with each other really matter. So lean on those relationships and help ensure that everybody gets to the polls this year. Thanks, Kate. Thanks for the time.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Jack. Thank you, Jack and Frankie. This was, I could listen to you guys all day, every day. Thank you for sharing your story. I am so excited to watch your documentary, and please, we put in the chat a run for more, the link to the doc, and we have Trans Empowerment Project's website in the chat as well. Please go look at the work they're doing and support them. It's incredible. And just on that note that Jack mentioned, there's a stat that came out right around, I think it was 2019, that said people, and as it relates to helping people get out the vote, people are 26 times more likely to do something if they are asked by a friend or family member. 26 times. So what Frankie was just talking about and Jack was just talking about in terms of relational organizing, which is a really fancy way of talking to your friends and family, do that. Do that today, do that tomorrow. I ask you to please relationally organize, because it works. And we are now going to actually, before we go to, I want to end on this note, because Jack and I had a conversation on September 1st, 2022, when I have conversations with folks that say something that really moved me and I'm having a hard moment. I look at this wall that has them all. And I was really, I thought this was really powerful, and I wanted to end with this before we get to our next panel. And that is Jack's words: finding joy is the most radical and revolutionary thing that we can do. So go call your friends and go find some joy. Thank you so much, Jack, and thank you so much, Frankie. Talk to you soon.